Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Network Strategy Manager at South East Water. So as well as leading the hydraulic modelling team there, I've also been quite involved in the business plan. And I just thought it might be helpful to share with you to highlight some of the regulatory challenges we've got for the next 5 years, the next AMP period. And apologies, some of you may be very close to this already. You may have been working in your own business plans, but I hope it might be useful for other people who perhaps aren't as close to the business plan process. So I just thought if we looked at a few of the aspects of Ofwat's final determination when it set out what water companies should pay, should charge, and how much and in what way they'll be regulated in some of these areas. And just thought it might be interesting to see how hydraulic modelling can help with all this. Ofwat's very quick to point out that water companies are monopolies, and so it has tried to come up with a way of getting us to perform a bit more commercially. And instead of going round trying to make sure that we've delivered millions of schemes that we say we need, it's come up with this outcomes framework, which should drive companies to perform in a way that customers might choose for them to perform. So the outcomes kind of reflect what customers might go for if they could choose which supplier they had, but also look after the future and the environment. So there are performance commitments that the companies make when they promise to their customers that they'll achieve various things for them. And then there are the incentives, the outcome delivery incentives, which are financial penalties or rewards, and also a certain element of reputation, where Ofwat can basically shame companies that don't perform up to the standards that they expect. So we've got, all the water companies have some common performance commitments, and these are seen as very much the customer's key priorities for the whole of the country. And then there are also some specific bespoke performance commitments, which reflect sort of some of the individual problems or issues that companies might have. And then when we go on to the incentives, somehow Ofwat don't believe we'll achieve our commitments without having some financial penalties or rewards attached to them. And also, again, the idea of reputational name and shame. And then there are some standard ones that just go with every company. And then there are also some special ones, because what Ofwat's trying to drive this time is companies going sort of above and beyond to achieve more for their customers in terms of value for money, good service, reduction in leakage, reduction in supply interruptions, etc., where they really will need to work on some new ideas, innovative technology, and then share that with the rest of the industry. So the idea is if you're upfront with some of these ideas, then you'll get extra reward on the basis that you do also share that through the industry. So the performance commitments that we're dealing with, there were 5 that were developed in a joint project with the Water UK, which are relevant to water supply, leakage, supply interruptions, per capita consumption, unplanned outage and mains burst. Then there were 2 that were set out by the regulators, one CRI by the Drinking Water Inspectorate, and then the treatment works compliance by the Environment Agency. Then we have some resilience measures. We talked about resilience earlier. The one that's appropriate for water supply is the risk of severe restrictions in a drought. Then also we have some others introduced by Ofwat just in conjunction with the experience that customers and developers get. They were developed in consultation with the industry, but again, you know, it's just how they want to make sure that we behave as if we were a commercial business and without the benefits of being a monopoly. Now, I expect most of you have heard this about the leakage target. We're trying to, well, all the companies have been expected to get leakage down by at least 15%. Now, it's a bit complicated how this is measured because there are different start dates from when you start measuring your reduction, but basically 15% is what we're trying to get to. But there is a bit of an added twist to this because we have to try and get 15% average over the 3 years. So basically, you either have to get down to make your 15% reduction by year 3, or you have to get even lower by the end so that your average is 15% for the last 3 years. So there were just some ideas really: pressure management, including small boosters, smart metering. And I think when I say smart metering, I don't just mean clever meters that send back information very quickly, but I also mean you've put the meters in the right place. And you know, the modelers can help a lot with making sure you put your meters in the right place. You don't put more than you need necessarily, but what you do spend on metering, you get right. DMA reorganisation, which we've done, but we're going to have to do again because it's cost beneficial to do more, and calm networks so that we don't cause the bursts. Now, supply interruptions, the challenge here is we need to reduce interruptions to supply by 41%. So this is measured in minutes per property. If anyone wants to see any more detail of this, I mean, well, you can ask me some questions, but also most of this is available on the Ofwat website if you choose to wade through it all. But so the performance commitment is over the 5 years that we've got down to every company only has 5 minutes worth of interruptions per property. But there is a bit of a glide path. We can start at 6 minutes, 30 seconds the first year. There's been a bit of a project to get some consistency. So this means every company is working to the same target. And we're looking at all interruptions over 3 hours, planned, unplanned, and third party. I mean, up to now, some companies have done different things. So really, this challenge is all about work that I think a lot of companies have done already in trying to make sure they know about backfeeds, alternative ways of getting water to areas, and making sure that everyone knows them. So that's all stuff that I think some companies have spent quite a lot of money already modelling that kind of thing and having these methods set out, kept stored somewhere so that you can draw on them as soon as you need them. Then more traditionally, designing further alternative feeds that you have to build, but with the reductions in funding available, then maybe you have to look and see which are the most critical ones. Critical link analysis can help with deciding where you do need to spend the money. Then again, optimising monitoring. The sort of monitoring you want for leakage and for demand understanding is possibly different from what you need for supply interruptions. Supply interruptions is all about getting information back as quickly as you can. So whilst I think it's really important that we get all that other monitoring in, what you want to understand is that some of it can be available really quickly to inform whoever's on duty that there's a problem, and we can get it fixed quickly to try and get out and get something done within the 3-hour limit. And then I think something we've certainly touched on in previous papers is about flexible networks. clever networks that open up and let water through, which obviously need to be set up very carefully, but there's some options there that you might be able to work on. And this was just supply interruptions performance. It's just a bit dispiriting. The challenge last AMP was 12 minutes for lots of companies. We're saying we need to achieve 6.5 minutes next year, 5 minutes by the end of the AMP. So when you look at that, average performance, which is the pale green, some of us are failing already because the red ones are failing now. We can't even make 12 minutes on a regular basis. Some companies manage better, particularly those who've probably already got some of the sort of resilience infrastructure in place. But it's going to be a big challenge, this one, for some of us. Now, per capita consumption was mentioned earlier. Ofwat's aiming to get consumption down to an average 131 litres per person per day. I think that's one of those things that it might be easier to achieve in some parts of the country than others. But anyway, all companies are actually committed to helping their customers use up to 13% less water by 2025 than they do now. And yes, that's good, reduce carbon emissions and also help customers spend less on their water. But, of course, for us, it means that the resource that did supply 1,000 houses or 10,000 houses is now going to have to be used to supply more houses. So we've got to see about getting that water to go further. And that's the same with the leakage reductions. The leakage reductions mean we need to develop fewer resources, but it does mean we have to develop the networks to move that water further to make sure that we're supplying all the customers adequately. Mains bursts, we've got to reduce mains bursts by 12%. Now, there's a new way of measuring this, which is burst mains per 1,000 kilometres. We always used to just report on a total number, but obviously to try and make it comparable between the companies, it's now burst mains per 1,000 kilometres. And 122 repairs per 1,000 kilometres is considered good. So that's represents sort of this 12% reduction because most of us are above that 122 at the moment. And there's not going to be enough money for this. It's got to be achieved, not conventionally. We can't go out and lay all the mains we need to do to replace the ones that are bursting too much. So basically, innovation is the answer. Interestingly, in conjunction with reducing leakage. So you find and fix just to get rid of the leaks is actually going to not help with your burst repair figures. So that means that you're trying to stop anything happening at all. You're trying to calm the network. You're trying to go for pressure management. All this, again, in conjunction with some of those other measures that modelling might help with leakage. Again, I think we touched on the resilience thing earlier. So we've been challenged with making sure that we reduce the risk of severe restrictions in drought with resilience schemes. We know, more people, less water, and the problems, particularly in the southeast of rivers drying up. So Ofwat's providing a bit of money to fund collaboration between different companies to try and develop big new ways of making more water available for everyone. So some new large reservoirs to hold the water instead of just letting it disappear when it does rain. And then I think people have probably heard about some of the national transfers that are being planned. I think sort of certainly schemes to link some of the rivers. And again, that will require us not only to talk to other water companies about who's got what available, but also to talk to the Canals and Rivers Trust about whether we can use canals and rivers. I'm not quite sure where all this goes environmentally, with the sort of connection of different rivers and catchments and things, but certainly this has all got to be looked at and considered under Ofwat's directives. And then also companies are expected to do more internally as well. So the obvious interconnecting their networks. And also, we already bring in bulk supplies, consider more bulk supplies perhaps from other companies. And also bringing in water perhaps from other licensed subtractors, maybe not water companies, and even looking at whether we can use water that other organisations have, not in terms of rivers and ponds and things that just being a bit innovative and wider looking than just thinking, oh well, there's a borehole or a river here. Again, Ofwat also wants to push us towards customer service, better customer service, and not only is there a measure this time for customer satisfaction for the people who have water from us, but there's also the developer satisfaction measure. So and the developer one is a completely new measure. The customer measure is just a different way of doing it, because now what they want to do is to compare not only the service people who contact the company get, but also the service that people who don't ever contact the company also feel they get, and compare that with other sectors. So that, in a way, is the more challenging part. It's comparing one company, water company, with another is one thing, but comparing us with John Lewis or something like that is actually probably a bit more challenging. And they also want to see, how we deal with the new ways of talking to people, contacting people, social media, whatever other forms of contact will develop in the future. Then there are also a few specific performance commitments, and I think we were able to choose some of these. There's the appearance and the taste and odour contacts we get, so basically complaints. They're expecting us to reduce that number by 34%, which takes everyone to an acceptable level of 0.67 contacts per 1,000 of the population. Some of these are different measures. So we've got per 1,000 population here, and then we've got per connection for the next one, but that's how it's been set out. So anything that we can do with modelling to assist with water quality is good. Then there's low pressure. I don't think this one is particularly a problem for most companies, because we're just having to try and commit to 0.55 properties per 10,000 connections. So that, I think, is probably one of the easiest ones, and in a way one of the easiest to model, because that's how we've been checking. We can use the models to check for failures under the future demand scenarios, and I think that's something we've probably been doing for some time. Just to add, the last challenge is that water bills need to fall by 12% before inflation, so less money. So basically, the energy optimization tools mentioned earlier, prioritization is required, so critical link analysis, single source outage, capacity checks under future demand scenarios. And then I'll just leave you, yes, innovation is required. So modelers, please, please find ways you can help, basically.